All right, it is 10 a.m. So we're going to get this party started, this webinar started. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Tamara Van Brun, and I am the program manager for Mindfulicity. And we're so pleased to have you here today to join us in this webinar. As people are getting on board, I just wanted to make sure you're in the right place. We're here to tackle what it means to be psychologically safety savvy. And we're going to talk today about the skills that each and every one of us can use to improve our psychological safety in the workplace. So happy to have you here and look forward to this great discussion. But before we begin, we may be gathering virtually, but it remains important to acknowledge the lands where we live, work, and play. So in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, and the Amskapi Piikani. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We are all treaty people. And now, to kick it off, I would like to introduce Catherine Quick, our community engagement specialist, who will lead the discussion with Lana Bentley about this very important topic on all our minds, psychological safety. Catherine?
Good morning, and thank you, Tamara, so much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm excited to dive into psychological safety and to learn from Lana how to build a psychologically safe workplace. So joining me is Lana Bentley, who is YW Calgary's Director of Program Strategy and the thought leader behind Mindfulicity, an innovative e-training tool that was born out of YW Calgary's expertise in counseling and mental wellness. We'll talk about that later, but first, Lana is a registered social worker and member of the clinical registry. And prior to joining YW, Lana worked with Alberta Health Services, where she spent most of her time in eating disorders and dialectical behavior therapy before going on to manage the psychiatric inpatient unit and psychiatric emergency room at the Alberta Children's Hospital. Lana has been a part-time faculty member at the Mount Royal University for over 10 years, and more recently began teaching at the University of Calgary. Lana is vice president of the Sharp Foundation and volunteers as a public member of the Alberta College and Association of Opticians. Hence the fabulous glasses, right, Lana? Welcome, Lana, and thank you for being here. First off, perhaps we should define psychological safety, because it's not just a nice workplace, is it?
Well, first of all, thank you for that glowing introduction, Catherine. And yeah, let's start by digging into what is psychological safety. It's an interesting term, hey? When I started working X number of years ago, it wasn't one that was necessarily on our radar. So there's a couple of components to psychological safety. When we talk about psychological safety, there's permission to make mistakes. So on a team where psychological safety is present, it's okay for people to, from a good place, and obviously after they've come to a reasonable assessment of what's required, it's okay for people to put forth a new idea, to try something different, or to express themselves, and they're able to do that without fear of punishment, humiliation, or being demeaned. Another important thing about psychological safety is it's when people have interpersonal relationships that they perceive as being strong enough that they can be stretched a little. If it's okay to sort of dig into that point a little bit, Catherine.
Sure.
I'll share a story, and folks know I tend to have a lot of wacky stories, but so I have a bionic ankle. And I remember after years of not taking it seriously because I have screws in my ankle, I decided to go see a personal trainer / physiotherapist. And I thought I'm really going to get to the bottom of this because my foot was hurting and my balance was off. And so I show up, I meet this guy for the first time, Catherine, and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to stand on top of a Bosu ball. For fitness enthusiasts on the call, you know that that's sort of like a dome-shaped squishy thing with a flat bottom. And so he says, stand on it. And I'm kind of going like this. I'm like, what's going on here? And then he hands me one of those really big balls that you sit on. He says, now hold on to that, and whatever you do, don't slide off the dome. I want to assess your balance. And so I'm like, this is weird, but okay. And then Catherine, he starts hitting the ball as I'm holding it. And he says, if you fall off, hop back on quickly. So I'm falling off, sliding off, I'm hopping back on as fast as I can. And I said to him at the end of that exercise, number one, I'm paying for this. But number two, I fell off a lot. I must have really bad balance. And he said, no, 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 no. He said, you don't measure balance by never losing it. You measure balance by how quickly you recover. That's how you measure balance. And I think that the same things sort of apply to relationships.
Yeah.
We don't know that we have good and safe relationships because they're perfect all the time. We know that we have strong relationships at work because when a mistake happens or when we have a difference of opinion, we have confidence that we'll be able to hop back on and pick up where we left off. So psychological safety doesn't mean that nothing tough ever happens. It means that when something tough happens, you can hop back on and keep going. So it's a really interesting concept. And like I said, I think it's about permission. I think it's about flexibility. And I think it's about that give and take.
Amazing. I was wondering where that story was going to go. So thank you for wrapping it all up there. That was great.
I promise there's always a point, Catherine. I promise there's always a point. Yeah.
So it's about hopping back in and feeling safe enough to fall off.
And I would
trusting yourself.
Yeah, and I would argue that if you're working in an environment where there's the fear of what happens if I slip, what happens if I make a mistake, that's not a sign of safety. This is not about perfectionism. It's about process and progress. And when we think about mindfulness, part of what mindfulness is about suspending judgment. It's about riveting yourself to the now. Don't borrow trouble from the future and don't access things that have already happened. Just be in this one moment, because really it's the only one you have, and it's the one that you can be connected to.
Right. So you mentioned mindfulness, and we will come back to that more. But you're saying that mindfulness plays into psychological safety.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to share the definition of mindfulness that I really like. Okay. Recognizing that mindfulness is an old tradition steeped in Buddhism, etc. So I just don't want to culturally appropriate, but the version that I've been exposed to that I really like is mindfulness is about paying attention on purpose without judgment. Paying attention on purpose without judgment. And I think that the word judgment is really, really critical there. Mm-hmm. If you make a mistake at work, there's a difference between saying, I noticed that I've made a mistake versus I'm such an idiot.
Right. I made a mistake and I'm gonna pay for it.
Yeah, part of mindfulness is about acceptance, and there's different foundations of mindfulness, one of which is called beginner's mind. Mm-hmm. Meaning you approach a situation from just a radically open perspective, sort of like you're looking at it through fresh eyes for the first time. These are all really key components of feeling comfortable and confident to express yourself in the workplace.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about folks who are on the receiving end of direction. It's also for leaders as well, for those who are—
That was my question.
Yeah. Well,
who's responsible for it?
Everybody. Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. And mindfulness is really elegant, but it's a process, and it constantly means turning the mind and riveting yourself to the now. And relationships are richer and fuller when both parties are able to do that at the same time.
Right. And who's responsible for it? Everyone. And who benefits from it? Everyone.
Yeah. And I think it really is important for leaders, especially, to role model mindfulness, because I think everybody on the call has probably heard the term multitasking. I think it's really important for leaders to speak to the benefit of single tasking, which doesn't mean you're going to be less productive. It actually means that whatever you're doing, do that and do it well and do it fully. And I think that that message is really important for leaders to give to folks on their teams, because I don't know how others on the call feel, but certainly there have been times in my career where I felt pressured. I was judging myself. I didn't want to let my boss down. And 9 times out of 10, they said, well, had you just let me know you were struggling or you needed something, they could have supported me. But it was that narrative in my head and that self-judgment and self-berating that got in the way. But part of what made it possible for me to feel safer was to hear the door is open, and it's okay for you to come to me with those, with your struggles.
Right. So you've actually lived this, both sides of a psychologically safe workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think mindfulness takes practice. So I would say moment to moment, I do the best that I can.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a video that we'd like to share, and this is one of the modules from Mindfulicity. It's called Psychological Safety Savvy, and this is just a snippet, so to get a taste, a real live taste of what Mindfulicity is like in operation. So if we can share that video, and then we'll come back to Lana and we'll unpack that together. We are not hearing the sound, Tamara.
Let me try that again.
All right, round 2.
Round 2.
I'm so stressed about getting this project finished. We're so behind. The costs keep mounting. We've got to get this work done today, no matter what. Time is of the essence. Before we start, does anyone have any concerns?
I know I'm new to this team, but can I ask about a concern I have with the process?
Many of us have been at this a long time, so thanks, but we know what we're doing. Watch and learn. Sue, did you hear what I said? Wake up!
Wait, what did the boss say? I totally missed it. It's hard to concentrate when I've had no sleep. I better not ask what was said because I'll probably get yelled at.
Where is Andy? This is the 3rd time they've been late. This will go on their file.
Okay. Well, there was a lot in there.
Yeah.
Super cute characters that we have there that are really easy to understand and very making their points very clear. So Lana, where do we begin? Like what happened here and maybe why as well?
Yeah, and you know, I think I know I've been there. I think I've been every single one of those characters at one point or another in my working life. You know, earlier, Catherine, I made the comment about borrowing trouble from the future, judgment, self-berating. So I think right out of the gates, we saw a leader who was understandably quite concerned that things were not going to get done and what might the consequence be. The thing about strong emotions is that they're sort of like a snowball rolling downhill in that they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we saw the leader in that scenario start to borrow trouble from the future, which then was projected outwards. When we're in those moments, I think it's so important to stop, pause, breathe. bring yourself back to this moment. And I think we saw what happened elsewhere in the interaction. It was kind of like a chain of dominoes. We had somebody who, and to be fair, we don't know what the new employee had to offer because we didn't get to hear from them.
Right.
And then we had another person who clearly missed what was going on and was too fearful to express themselves. So not a psychologically safe workplace.
Right.
And certainly not one where folks are in the moment in a non-judgmental manner. And things are going to get missed.
Right. Yeah. I love how you said strong emotions, not overreacting. I mean, I think that's a really important way of coming into building a psychologically safe workplace as well. And, acknowledging that we have strong emotions sometimes.
Well, so can we just take a minute to dig into that?
Yeah, for sure.
So the reason I said strong emotions is because fundamentally, I don't really believe in good or bad emotions.
Right.
I do, however, think you can have pleasant versus unpleasant emotions. And I think both are valid. Yeah. Emotions are an important source of information. And, at YW Calgary, a big part of the work that we do is with people who've had interpersonal conflicts and who've had challenges with relationships.
Yep.
And one of the misconceptions that we have to work with people around is, well, it's not okay to get upset. It's not okay for me to have needs. It's not, and the message is always time out. Feelings are what make you human.
Right. And
they're inevitable. The best thing you can do when you have a strong emotion is to notice it, but just notice it.
I remember you said once to me too, just the facts.
And when we treat, so number one, when we assess an emotion as good or bad, that's going to influence how you move forward.
Yeah.
And judgment also intensifies your emotion. So if you're having a strong emotion, it's okay to say, holy bananas, like I am noticing, I stepped into my workspace and my boss came over to me and said, you're 5 minutes late. And I'm angry. Do they not know that I worked late last night or that I had to drop the kids off? So, that's all mind reading versus I'm noticing I'm feeling really frustrated. Let me just take a deep breath and ask myself, what does the situation require? So there's no good or bad emotions. There's just emotions, and some of them feel harder to handle than others, but they're all an important source of information. And we just need to balance that out with a more reasoned assessment of what's going on. So I'm so glad you picked up on that.
And I'd love to talk about, just in that video scenario, the bystander, the new employee that seemed to be fresh and eager and, maybe had some good things going on from her previous workplace and from her own learnings. Now, what happened to her in this situation?
I think the behavior that we saw there was actually really healthy, which was, okay, maybe I'm a newer member of the team. I'm still going to put forth an idea. And so I think what's really cool about that is we had somebody who was able to engage in taking a risk and putting an idea out there. Now, what that speaks to is that you can only control yourself and your behavior.
Right.
We can't guarantee the outcome, but we know there's a better outcome possible if we're putting into the dynamic what we also want to see from others. And I think that speaks to your point, Catherine, about how who's responsible for a psychologically safe workplace? Well, we all are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, for sure. So when I just want to point out too, that when this video is incorporated into one of our Mindfulicity modules, the psychological safety savvy, the participant in the module will also be unpacking it much like we are in a more simple way, but they'll be able to unpack it and look at the ins and outs of that scenario. So now we have one that shows the other perspective, and I'm not going to use those judgy words of good and bad. I'm going to just show the other perspective. So we'll launch that and watch that together, and then we'll do the same with the second one.
Yeah.
We're so behind schedule, and costs keep rising. I'm so stressed. I can feel my thoughts and my heart racing. Okay. Just stop. Pause. breathe. Hi, everyone. We're under a tight deadline, but safety is still paramount. So it's important you speak up if you have any concerns before we start.
I just started here, but where I come from, we actually did a mindfulness moment to keep our mind present and on task. It really helped.
Good idea. We've been at this a long time, so we're always open to improve our process. It's important to get our work done, but we need to take the time to keep our mental health in check. Sue, are you okay? You seem really tired.
Actually, I haven't had a good sleep for 2 months.
It must be hard to function with this going on. After this meeting, let's look at how you can get some help to improve your sleep. Anybody hear from Andy? They haven't shown up again. I will reach out to make sure they are okay.
Well, that one had a much different feeling overall, didn't it? It was much less stressful to watch, and different outcomes too. So why don't you take it and walk us through what happened? Like, talk about what the skills the leader was using. Tell us your perspective on it, please.
Well, I think there's an important clarification that we should make, which is what mindfulness is and what it isn't.
Okay.
So mindfulness is about paying attention to the current moment without judgment. Mindfulness is not about feeling better necessarily, it's about feeling more fully. And I think that's an important place for us to start, Catherine, because what we saw was the leader in this scenario was fully naming a number of unpleasant thoughts and physical sensations that were coming up.
Right.
And sometimes when people are first developing their own connection with mindfulness, they'll say, is it going to make me feel better? And my response is, and this is such a frustrating thing that therapists say, it depends. so you know, for some, you know, for some people, they have an adverse response to joy, and they might reject that and actively work to not experience it. And for others, it's totally different. But I do want to clarify that mindfulness is not necessarily about feeling better. It's about feeling more fully. But you need to do that anyways. If you're not letting yourself be in the current moment, that doesn't make things better. And so even if you're in a tough moment with your team or at work, it might seem tempting to stuff it and try and pack it away. That doesn't work. Not thinking about something, forcing yourself to not think about something is still thinking about it. I'll do an experiment with people on the call. Everybody, please don't think about pink elephants right now. Please don't do it. What mindfulness does is it invites you to notice what's coming through your field of attention. But what it says is, don't push it away and don't try and hang on to it with all your might. Just notice it as it's happening for you. Even if you're in an unpleasant moment and there's an opportunity for you to engage in behavior that might help you change that, nothing changes unless you first acknowledge and accept where you are. And I think that's what we saw the manager doing. Right.
He was feeling more fully, wasn't he?
Right. By saying, let me reset.
Yeah.
Let me come into this moment. Then it was okay. Now I can address these things one at a time.
Right. Right. And the employees felt safe in being their true selves and feeling their feelings fully as well.
That's right. And I think we've all been there where there's a strong urge and a pull to multitask. I'm just going to ignore that and do this now. What's the quality of what you produce?
Yeah. So if we think about the skills that they were using in that, and that's a conflict situation, say, but what would the benefits of working and living in a psychologically safe place, because it's at home too, right? It's not just in the workplace. But so what are the benefits to doing that? What do they get more out of? What do we get more out of?
What? Well, I think there's several things. Certainly with the recent pandemic, we have seen how tough this has been on people's mental health. We've seen, I think people's home has no longer been their home. It's now a multi-purpose space in that it's become school for some. I'm sure some folks on the call have had to not just do their jobs, not just be partners, but maybe caregivers, teachers, helping to take care of neighbors. We've seen how our work is impacted when we have different things pulling on us all at the same time. So we know that with mindfulness, which helps us focus our attention and bring our full self to whatever it is we're doing, we know that the quality of what we produce is going to be better. And we also know that there are some really tangible positive health impacts around mindfulness. When I first started with mindfulness, Catherine, I thought, like, what's the deal with it? Like, there's no way something so simple could be this helpful. But folks, people have used mindfulness to change their relationship with exercise, to change their relationship with habits that are unhelpful, to change the quality of their interactions with other people. Coming from where I've worked previously, we helped people use mindfulness to surf the urge to use drugs or alcohol. Like on top of, it's going to help you focus your attention more, which means what you produce will be of a different level of quality, but it's also good for health and wellness. And I think the biggest resource any organization has, I think, is its people.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget about the connection between mindfulness and safety, psychological safety and physical safety, because if you're not mindful, you will not be physically safe, but also if you are not in a psychologically safe environment, you won't mention safety concerns.
Yeah, and what you're bringing up is a really interesting concept in mindfulness called autopilot.
Okay.
So autopilot is where you literally just move through things without any intention or focus. And so I'll use sort of a non-work but kind of work example. There will be a day where we're in our offices again, but like, how did you get to work?
Yeah.
How many people on the call can relate with the experience of you left your house, you got to work, you have a half-consumed lukewarm Tim Hortons coffee in your hand, so whatever route you took, there must have been a drive-through. But if somebody said to you, well, what route did you take to get to work? You had to pause and think.
Yeah.
So you were going through the motions, but there wasn't a lot of intention.
Yeah.
And when you have autopilot happening in team meetings, when you have it happening between colleagues, it's not just, Catherine, that mistakes can happen because you might miss something if you're not paying attention to the details along the way, but you may also just be missing good ideas and things that can enhance and improve whatever it is your team's working towards.
Yeah. Well, autopilot, yes, I totally agree. It's me sitting down in my office chair, and I only almost fell off it once, but now I'm very mindful when I sit on my chair because it rolls away. But yeah, when you're talking about ideas and the safety around sharing ideas, but also the willingness to have an open mind and be in the present tense to be listening to those ideas.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge people on the call today. I'm going to challenge them around an autopilot behavior. We've all gone to work or started a meeting with, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
I challenge folks to actually ask that question in a way that the listener knows this isn't just a pleasantry that you're putting out there. Like, I want you to actually ask a colleague after our call today, how are you doing? And I want you to notice what's different about asking in a way where you want the other person to know that you're there to listen versus just the autopilot, hey, how was your day? How was your weekend? There's a lot of autopilot interactions that happen in the workplace and a lot of autopilot responses. Because I've answered that question just as quickly and casually as I've asked it. And I was having a horrible day, Catherine, or I wasn't doing very well, or I was making mistakes, but my response was fine, and you?
Yeah.
I would challenge everybody on the call to move from a place of autopilot to full intention. You pick whatever the interaction is, you pick the activity, but really just notice the difference. And that's what we call informal mindfulness practice, which is whatever you're doing deeply.
Sorry, you mentioned when we go back to the office. You know, we've been given a bit of an opportunity to do things a bit differently now. We're going back and we're going to maybe change the way we do those things, and we are going to bring a more mindful perspective day in and day out, because we've had a switch turned off and now we're turning it back on. So maybe these are the tools that we can take on a regular basis, take them into the workplace and into our lives and make us stay in this more calm place.
Yeah, and I think, Catherine, part of how we do that and how we bring mindfulness to the workplace is, I think it can be a super intimidating concept at first.
Yeah.
But this is where you can either engage in formal mindfulness practice, which is find time in your day where for 10, 15, 30 minutes, whatever the case might be, breathing, meditation, yoga. But you can also do informal practice, which is where pick something that you typically do in the day that you don't really pay attention to, but really practice focusing your attention and then notice the difference.
Notice. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to talk about mindfulicity, because you were, you know, a key critical participant in developing that and putting really animating it and giving it the life that it has now, that we can take to the workplace and incorporate in our own programs as well at YW, which is really exciting. Yeah. So we've got 10 15-minute modules.
Yeah.
We've got coping with uncertainty. We've got surf the urge. Here we go. We've got a beautiful infographic of all of the modules that we have. Surf the urge, a balanced approach, managing microaggressions, healthy boundaries, communicating through conflict, learning to listen, and accepting reality. And of course, our psychological safety savvy, which is the latest off the press. So how do each of these nuggets, how do these go together to provide a mindfulness in a mindful workplace, and then ultimately to psychological safety?
Yeah, well, I think what's really cool about each of these modules is that they fit together like pieces of a puzzle.
Right.
But they're also really easy to digest. And so I think the fact that they are 10 to 15 minutes in length means that you can consume them rather quickly, and they give you things that you can start practicing right away. What I also like about mindfulness is that it's a really elegant approach. This isn't an approach that's really saturated in complex concepts or a lot of jargon. It's about paying attention on purpose without judgment. And each of the modules shows you how you would bring that foundation of paying attention and being more present and being more aware to all the different things that help you not just thrive at work, but just thrive more generally. Mindfulness is an orientation that you can use to live your life. And I know that might sound kind of out there, but it's true. Skills are transferable, not just in workplace relationships, but in relationships that you have outside of work as well. So when we think about psychological safety, which when we started, Catherine, I'd said, it's about feeling confident to take risks, but it's also about being able to navigate interpersonal dynamics without fear or self-judgment. Each of these topics will help you do just that, because it helps you tackle the things that either stand in the way of being able to take risks, or it helps you become more aware of what you might be doing that inadvertently might be shutting other people down. But it also gives you some tangible things to start doing more of. Help you embrace the current moment.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had people use these for office workers. We've had use them in remote field workers. They're very versatile because they are short and they're available on devices, you know, so they're very accessible in that way. And I think no matter what role you play in an organization, it gives you like a foundation and a common language from which to have discussions, solve problems, make requests, set boundaries, you know. And I really love the common language aspect of it, because people come from all different backgrounds, educationally, culturally, and sometimes it's difficult to find the word to describe what you need to solve for or what you want to broach.
I think the common language is really key, and it's really basic. Stop, pause, breathe, surf the urge to act on an impulse. You know, these are things that you can really quickly uptake and start to use. Almost immediately.
And it's beautiful. We did healthy boundaries with our team, and it was great, because at the beginning of our discussion we said, you know, you can be open, or you don't have to be. Like, you can have a boundary. And it's a wonderful tool to use to help people be open if they wish, if you want to use it in a team environment.
And what I like about mindfulness is that it's an ongoing process. It's not a single event. So it's something that you kind of commit to and practice every day.
So I know we do have some questions, and I'm not sure if are you up for some of those?
Always.
Awesome. Okay, great. So let's see, what do we have here? Let's see what we have in the chat. Okay. Here, somebody, one of the people on the call, I wanted to ask, how does one deal with a bossy leader who is too bossy, who shouts and orders people around at work? This is a serious challenge as it affects employees' mental health.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that sounds like a really difficult situation, and I'm sorry to hear somebody's having to deal with that. I think the first thing is, Catherine, we talked about this earlier. Ultimately, everybody is responsible for their own behavior.
Yes.
And so I think there's different ways that you can use mindfulness. What mindfulness allows you to do is press pause and ask yourself, is this a situation where I need to change how I feel about what's going on? Is this a situation where I can problem solve and try and influence the outcome? Is this a situation where I just need to try and stay safe and focus on self-preservation? Or I suppose there's always the option of I could do nothing different, see what happens. So I think what mindfulness can allow, if you're having a challenging interaction, is it can certainly help the individual who's feeling impacted or overwhelmed by that manage their emotions. Or I think it can, if you know, I've just had an interaction with my boss and I say, I'm noticing that I feel really disrespected. I'm noticing that's the third time this has happened today. And I'm noticing that I don't want to come in tomorrow because I'm just feeling like this is a really difficult place to be. If I've noticed all those things, this might now compel me to act. But it's going to allow me to press pause and determine what's the most effective course of action.
Right.
So I'm gonna surf the urge to just meet my boss's energy with equally intense energy, which could just lead to a snowball effect. And it might lead me to a place of, well, I'm noticing all these things. This isn't viable. It's not productive. I need to either speak with my boss or I need to go get support from human resources. At the end of the day, Catherine, build up leads to blow up. Earlier I said, you know, don't think about pink elephants. You can't suppress what's there. Mindfulness is inviting you to notice what's there and to press pause and to figure out, what do you want to do in the situation? And like I said, it may not make you feel better in the moment, but at the very least, if you're acknowledging what's happening in the moment, and you're taking a step back and just saying, what's my relationship with this current moment, you have a better chance of planning for a more effective course of action.
Right.
Ignoring it won't work. Stuffing it won't work.
No. And like you said, that pause, and also not combating his energy with this equal and opposite energy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one, but I would like to point out that that question came from one of our colleagues at YWCA Zimbabwe.
No way. Somebody from the movement.
Amazing.
Yeah.
One of our sector. Wow. Worldwide. That's amazing.
That's
Thank
really
you for that question. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So let's swing back a little bit to mindfulicity, because there are some questions about mindfulicity.
Yes,
It's help the organization develop capacity to create a psychologically safe workplace. So they put the pieces together and use the tools that are provided by mindfulicity's modules. And the thing is, it's not a straight line. Mindfulness isn't a straight line, is it?
No.
So we have that wonderful collection of modules,
Mhm.
and the employee can use them how they wish.
Yeah, and it's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Right? Because mindfulness is about riveting yourself to whatever moment that you're in. That moment might be pleasant and unpleasant other days, but it's a process of actively bringing yourself back to the current moment and actively divorcing yourself from judgment.
Yeah.
And when you have a workplace where people are able to do that, people can be themselves. And when a mistake is made, they can just say, I notice I've made a mistake and I'm not going to beat myself up. Or if you're in a leadership position, this person has made a mistake and I'm not going to punish them. We need to just course correct and move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you can jump in and out of the modules so that you can, if you need a reminder, or if you come up against something where you say, I'm not acting in a way or reacting or responding in a way that I'm feeling good about, I can course correct. I can think about that, right? It's a tool. So let's see what else we have on for questions here. Okay, we did have one. What to do when I am having a strong emotion and my boss isn't supporting that? You have some tools for that?
Yeah, you know, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because you can only influence your own behavior. But here's the thing. Every emotion has a corresponding action urge.
Okay.
And so what that means is if I'm feeling really embarrassed, my urge might be to retreat or run away. If I'm feeling really anxious, I might have an urge to avoid. If I'm feeling really afraid, I might just want to leave the situation or placate the other individual. And so it's just really important when we notice ourselves having a strong emotion to once again label that it is an emotion, to label the thoughts that are coming up, and to become a detective in your own case or on your own case and ask yourself, is what I'm noticing right now appropriate for this interaction? There's a thing called cognitive distortions, and sometimes when we're having really strong emotions and we're in a very difficult moment, our interpretation of how others around us are receiving that can go through a filter of sorts. And so sometimes bosses are not being supportive, and sometimes bosses genuinely don't understand what the need is, in which case we can use our mindfulness skills to take a deep breath, notice the emotion, notice any action urges that are stemming from that, and become a detective on your own case and say, okay, I came in, I told my boss that I need to adjust my work hours so I can do school pickups. He said no. And now I'm feeling angry and frustrated, and he's such a jerk, and he doesn't understand the demands of a working mother. Like, to be fair, that could be the case. It could be, or it could not be.
Right.
And what I need to do is use my mindfulness skills to stop, pause, breathe, notice everything that's going on. And I'm either going to say to my boss, you know, I got to be honest, I'm feeling really frustrated right now because I really needed I needed this accommodation. So can we either revisit, or is there something that I need to articulate differently? But it's that pause and becoming a detective in our own case and suspending judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a good question that kind of relates to that in the Q&A. How can we listen better so that we respond in a more empathetic way? There was a listening disconnect there too, wasn't it, between the boss and the employee, asking for that?
Yeah, yeah. And I think listening and hearing are two different things. So hearing just means the words that you spoke reverberated off my eardrum, and I know that a noise was made. Listening, however, is when there's comprehension, and when there's remembering, and when there's a response that is directly linked to what was shared. And so listening is a very active process. And as we're listening, Catherine, we have to just listen.
Right.
If you're just listening and you're not being judgmental, that's going to allow you to ask better questions. And by better, I mean you're going to be more able to clarify, to reflect, to paraphrase.
So is that empathy?
Empathy is when, so sympathy is what I feel for you, and empathy is what I feel as you.
Yes. So listening in an empathetic way looks like what?
Listening in an empathetic way is when you're able to communicate to the other person that you have considered their perspective from truly their perspective, and you're able to reflect back. So what you're saying is blank, or so you feel blank.
So that's that was one of the questions. And now there's one kind of a interesting one. I work in a very male-dominated conventional workplace. I would love to begin to build in some of these concepts slowly, but I'm afraid of all the judgment that will come with me being the instigator as the only female leader. P.S. I feel a responsibility and calling to begin this process. Wonderful. That is great news. Somebody going to take the risk to do that. So how could we, what kind of tips could you give her to support that?
You know, interestingly enough, I think that mindfulness, I mean, first of all, I work in a very women-dominated environment. So just the facts, I would argue, I have the opposite experience where sometimes I take for granted. You know, there isn't as much gender diversity here as my friends who work in the energy sector, for example. I think with mindfulness, what's kind of cool is that what it asks you to do is actually suspend judgment and to talk about what you're just noticing. And so to a certain degree, there really is a pragmatism that's hugely accessible to people when we say, well, I noticed this and I noticed that. Mindfulness might be about you feeling more fully and coming into closer relationship with your own emotions, but that doesn't mean being mindful is an inherently emotional process. What it means is that we very matter-of-factly notice what's going on and we call it for what it is. And so mindfulness can actually be really, really good in environments where people may not talk about feelings very deeply. Because it just says, well, a feeling's a feeling and a thought's a thought and a behavior's a behavior, and we're talking about the here and now. And it's not about feeling better necessarily, it's about just gently articulating, this is what I'm noticing. And so, you know, I think as it relates to what would it be like to apply this in a very male-dominated environment, full disclosure, all of my jobs have been in female-dominated environments. So I may not be the best person to ask about that. But I would also say, you know, we've engaged with larger organizations around the city of Calgary where they are very male dominated, and we've seen nothing but good uptake because on the teams have articulated there's just a clarity that comes with this that works.
Yes. Yeah. And it's based in neuroscience. This is not woo-woo, right? Like this is scientifically based, validated, and like you said, it's facts. And we have had great success in the city. And it's just about breaking it down and making it so that it's not as scary, not as I don't know what the word is, but it's not as scary to dip a toe in.
And I think that, you know, it's an excellent question, and one, I think one worthy of continuing offline. So certainly I think you've been putting our information there. these are broadly applicable concepts that work.
Yes.
They work because, to your point, they appeal to everybody. Everybody is in relationship with the current moment. This just helps them do it more effectively.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's another question here, and I'm not vetting them before I say them because I can't think and talk and read at the same time, because that wouldn't be very mindful, would it? I wouldn't be listening to you. Unfortunately, so many people are lonely and hurt and unheard. Does giving everyone an opportunity to be open and share their challenges ever derail a meeting or co-opt too much time? If so, how can this be dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is quite possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say, though, if I'm dialed in and I'm noticing, so if you, Tamara, Bryn, Jacqueline, and I am just pulling YWers on the call, if we're in a meeting and I notice that somebody is really distracted or really upset, I think I'm going to notice that, and I'm going to be curious. And if that person needs more support afterwards, then as a leader, if I've picked up on that, that's where the mindfulness is. I think we want to be clear that mindfulness is about balance. And when we're paying attention on purpose to what's going on in the current moment, it allows us to plot the best course of action. So certainly if I'm in a team meeting and I notice that somebody is upset or distracted, the team meeting still needs to occur. But if I'm a leader and I'm creating a psychologically safe environment, it's a yes and. So I'm noticing we do need to finish the meeting, and I have somebody who needs more of me after the meeting.
Right.
Yeah. Two things can be true at once.
Right. I love your little Lana-isms.
So I think that was the last question that we can take. I lost track of time here.
I know. Well, and I do want to be courteous to people that, that they have to go from this webinar onto their next meeting and they need a little bit of change of scenery and what have you. But we do have some resources that we're going to post in the chat. And I think I'm going to turn it back to Tamara, who's also on the screen. Thank you, Lana. I love talking with you.
It was my pleasure.
Yes,
really
yes. Thank you, both Lana and Catherine. It was such an engaging conversation and super useful discussion. I think, what came out of it that we will probably all agree on is that, a psychologically safe workplace starts with each of us. And so, as you leave today, I think consider, how are you showing up at work and at home? Because that's an important part of it. In order to create a psychologically safe workplace, you want to bring your best self to the table. And so what are you doing to take care of your mental health? That's a question. That's part of what we talk about in these modules. And what are you doing for the well-being of others on your team? Like Lana says, asking them, how are you doing today? And really listening to the answer. And also in your life. So we know that the primary barriers to successfully addressing mental health are, especially in the workplace, are the lack of policies and resources, perhaps, the lack of awareness, and a lack of trust. So we can help you with that. And Mindfulicity, as we've been talking about, as you saw in the 10 modules, is a training program that consists of those 10 bite-sized, engaging, online, skill-building modules that can help build a psychologically safe workplace. It helps employees gain and apply the day-to-day skills that we talked about to manage the stress and build those conflict management skills in the workplace. And when organizations invest in the skill building training, employers can lay the groundwork for like a safe and secure space where employees can lead their best lives at work and at home. So if you are interested in learning more and how you can bring this program to your organization, please visit mindfulicity.ca. You can also contact, I think Mari put her contact information there, Mari Surpass, msurpass@ywcalgary.ca, and email us and we'll get in touch. And I want to thank all of you for participating. I see Jen Huebner from Suncor. Thank you for commenting. They too have launched it, and they're very pleased. And Jen's been very instrumental in making this sing there at their organization, and they're getting some great feedback from everyone in that. So thank you, Jen, for that comment. Thanks. We'll leave you with that. Give you 6 minutes to spare before your next meeting. And Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So please join us again. And like I said, we would love to talk to you. So get in touch with us. Thanks.